Snoop Dogg has spent nearly 3 decades telling the world that he and Biggie Smalls were brothers, that the East-West war was a label creation, and the love between them was real.
Big got in that studio and said, I don't know why this Snoop's calling me. I'm not telling this where I'm at.
But Biggie wasn't answering his calls, and his mother spent the rest of her life making clear exactly what she thought of the men who were in her son's world when he died.
His murder at 24 years old remains unsolved.
This is what Voletta Wallace said about Snoop Dogg, and what Biggie already knew. The tense relationship between Biggie and Snoop. Voletta Wallace spent 28 years pointing a finger at the men she believed failed her son, and Snoop Dogg's name was always on that list. And the tension between Biggie and Snoop was real, documented, and runs deeper than most people know. Before we get to what Voletta Wallace allegedly said about Snoop Dogg, you need to understand what was happening between Biggie and Snoop while Biggie was still alive. Because whatever Voletta believed or didn't believe about Snoop, her position was not formed in a vacuum. It was formed inside the wreckage of one of the most hostile environments in music industry history, a period that put Biggie and Snoop on opposite sides of a war that killed 2 of rap's biggest names in 6 months. And the people closest to Biggie say he knew exactly where Snoop stood. The East Coast-West Coast rivalry had 2 capitals: Death Row Records in Los Angeles, Suge Knight, Tupac, Snoop, and Bad Boy Records in New York, Biggie. 2 labels, 2 coasts, and a machinery of media and label politics that turned individual artists into symbols of a war they didn't all choose to fight. Snoop Dogg was Death Row's first superstar. His 1993 debut Doggy Style established West Coast rap's commercial dominance and set the tone for the entire East-West rivalry that followed. By the time Biggie released Ready to Die in 1994, the 2 labels were being positioned as adversaries. And then, the 1995 Source Awards happened. Suge Knight on stage in New York, taking a public shot at Biggie's record label boss in front of the whole industry, and Snoop at the microphone behind him, asking the East Coast crowd if they had love for Death Row. They booed. The lines were drawn publicly in front of cameras. But here is where the story gets complicated. In the months after Tupac was shot in Las Vegas in September 1996, Snoop quietly visited Biggie in New York. Biggie was recovering from a car accident. Snoop has described what he saw as genuine grief. Biggie hurt over Tupac's death, expressing love for a man the world thought was his enemy. Snoop has told this story across Drink Champs, The Angie Martinez Show, and multiple other platforms for decades without the details shifting. He says Biggie was his friend. He says he made a conscious choice not to hate him. He says the beef was a label construction, not a personal one. Biggie's camp does not tell that story the same way. Lil Cease confirmed that Biggie was in California for 2 months before his death. Not 2 days, not 2 weeks, 2 full months in Snoop City, in Death Row territory, in the months following Tupac's murder. And former bodyguard Gene Deal, a man who was inside those rooms, has gone on record about what Biggie was actually doing during those 2 months.
We gonna hook up. What picture you see with Snoop and Big while they was out there?
Deal's question is a simple one. If Snoop and Biggie were as close as Snoop says, produce the evidence. 1 photograph, 1 restaurant, 1 studio session.
What restaurant they went to meet up? Where did they get together and smoke? Big like to smoke, Snoop like to smoke.
2 men in the same city for 2 months who both like to smoke, and not once did they share a moment that anyone in Biggie's circle can account for. Deal's argument is built entirely on that absence. And what filled the space where those meetings weren't happening, according to Deal, was Snoop calling and Biggie not answering.
Let's keep it a buck. Big got in that studio and said, I don't know why this Snoop's calling me.
Biggie was in Los Angeles. Snoop was calling. And Biggie's response, according to Deal, who heard it directly from people in that studio, was to keep his location hidden.
I'm not telling this where I'm at.
Deal insists this is not secondhand. He stakes the claim on his own credibility.
It's from my mouth to God's ear. The said, this Snoop keep calling me.
And Biggie's cover, when asked about Snoop's calls, was to claim ignorance about his whereabouts.
But I heard that nigga's in Miami. This came out Big's mouth.
Snoop keep calling me, but I heard he's in Miami. A deflection, a way of pretending not to know where Snoop was as a reason not to call back, while Snoop was calling him in the city they were both standing in. That is the foundation of the tension. Not a war of diss tracks, not a public confrontation, a silence. 2 months of it in the same zip code. And what makes that silence so loud is the way Snoop keeps talking to fill it. Snoop's consistent narrative, told across Drink Champs, Angie Martinez, complex interviews, and more, is that he and Biggie were closer than the public knew. That the East-West War was a label creation, that when the cameras were off, there was warmth. He describes a moment at a Vibe magazine party, 2 days before Tupac was shot in Las Vegas in 1996, where Biggie found him in the crowd, hugged him, and said, in private, with no audience, with nothing to gain, "We brothers, man." He has held that story up for nearly 3 decades, as evidence of what the relationship actually was beneath the surface noise. Deal does not dispute that Biggie could be cordial. What he disputes is the interpretation. In Deal's telling, Biggie was not a man who operated on warmth alone. He operated on information, on reads, on the kind of assessment that keeps people alive in environments that want them dead. A hug at a party and a handshake in front of witnesses is one thing. What happens in a recording studio in Los Angeles with no cameras, when someone you are supposed to trust keeps calling and you keep not picking up, that is the real data point. Deal's framing is built on a simple principle. Look at the actions, not the words. Biggie was in California for 2 months. Snoop was in California. They both smoke. Neither of them is a recluse. Biggie spent those 2 months recording, moving around, going to parties, doing what he was there to do. And in all of that, not one confirmed moment with Snoop, not one photograph, not one verified account of them being in the same room. The absence, in Deal's reading, is the relationship's truest statement. And the reason Biggie was keeping that distance, according to the people around him, goes back to something that happened in Brooklyn at a video shoot in the years before his death. What happened in Red Hook, Snoop's version? To understand the weight of those 2 months of silence in Los Angeles, you have to go back to what happened the last time Snoop's crew came to Biggie's territory. Because Snoop Dogg does not just claim that Biggie ignored him. He claims Biggie actively tried to get him killed. The Dog Pound, Snoop's crew, were in New York to film a video for their track New York, New York. The plan, as Snoop tells it, was built on goodwill. Before the shoot, they went to Funkmaster Flex's radio station, publicly, openly, to announce their presence and extend an invitation. They wanted New York rappers in the video. They wanted to make the visit a collaboration, not an invasion.
We went to go see Funkmaster Flex early that day, and he shined on us.
Flex did not let them in. The door closed before the message could go out.
We was going up to the radio station to do this. Yo, New York, DPG, we here shooting a video.
They left the station without getting on the air and headed to the shoot location, Red Hook, Brooklyn. And then, according to Snoop, someone else got on that radio. Someone made a very different announcement.
So then you guys head to the video shoot, and Biggie calls the station and went on the air.
Right.
What Biggie allegedly broadcast was not a calm message. It was the location of the shoot, Red Hook, and a call to Brooklyn to respond.
He said it's a Tupac Dog Pound video in Red Hook, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn stood up, and what followed at the video shoot was not a welcome.
Brooklyn, stand up.
Shoot at you at the Dog Pound video in New York?
Shots were fired at the Dog Pound video set in Red Hook, and Snoop's account of who orchestrated it leaves nothing ambiguous.
Biggie called the shot.
Allegedly.
No, he did.
Allegedly.
He did.
Okay.
I heard it with my own 2 ears. I got a great memory.
Biggie called the shot. Snoop says he heard it himself. He lays out a clean sequence. Flex turned them away. Biggie got on the air. The shooting happened at the shoot. He carries that account with complete certainty. No hedging. No allegedly. No distance between himself and what he says he witnessed. This claim has not been proven in a court of law. Some accounts from former associates suggest Biggie was linked to ordering or allowing tension due to perceived disrespect in the track, but it remains Snoop's account, not a legal finding. What it does, however, is give full context to why Biggie, from Snoop's perspective, was never really a friend in the way Snoop has publicly framed it, and why, from Biggie's perspective, Snoop was a man whose motives deserved suspicion. 2 men, 2 versions, 1 dead, and a web of events in between them that nobody has ever been able to fully untangle. The Red Hook incident and what it meant to Snoop's crew sits at the root of how this relationship actually functioned. Beneath every moment of warmth that Snoop describes, the vibe party hug, the secret studio visit, there was an unresolved accusation. Snoop believed Biggie had his people shot at in Brooklyn. Biggie, in Los Angeles, was keeping his location off Snoop's radar. Neither man ever addressed these things publicly in a room together. And then Biggie was killed before they ever had the chance. The somebody's gotta die detail. What Snoop says was love. What Biggie's camp says was sarcasm. The most revealing piece of evidence in the whole Biggie-Snoop dynamic is a single line. One line from one song on Biggie's final album, Life After Death. A line that Snoop Dogg has held up for 28 years across dozens of interviews as proof that Biggie was rocking with him before he died. And a line that the people closest to Biggie say means the exact opposite of what Snoop thinks it means. The track is Somebody's Gotta Die. The line is this: trying to sell records like Snoop? Oops. Snoop's interpretation: Biggie was acknowledging his pull, his sales power, his presence presence in the conversation, a salute, a shout-out from a man who, in his final recording sessions, was reaching across the Coast Divide and giving Snoop his flowers. Snoop has cited this line repeatedly as the cornerstone of the argument that the two were on good terms when Biggie died.
One thing I noticed right about Snoop, when he do interviews talking about Big, he always bring up how Big shouted him out before he passed away.
Gene Deal has noticed the pattern too, and Deal's reading of that line is the structural opposite of Snoop's.
You know that Biggie line, right? Trying to sell records like Snoop, oops, that line right there.
The key is in the word oops, in Biggie's voice, deployed in Biggie's manner. Arrogant, sharp, cutting. Oops is not an accident. It is a retraction, a sarcastic pullback. The construction is, I was going to say something nice about this man, but then I caught myself. Oops, think again.
He being sarcastic. If Snoop look at that as being a blessing, let him run with it.
That last sentence is the verdict from Biggie's side. If Snoop wants to take sarcasm as a blessing, nobody is going to stop him. But it does not change what the line actually was. Deal goes further. He says Biggie's behavior in the studio, the avoiding, the deflecting, the not answering, was not just personal discomfort. Biggie believes Snoop may have been trying to line them up, positioning them for the very people who, in the months after Tupac's death, were still carrying active grievances against Bad Boy. Deal says it directly.
And when we was in California, he wasn't favorable of Snoop because he know what he had done.
He know what he had done. This is the through line in Deal's account. Biggie's silence was not social awkwardness. It was a calculated read of a man he did not trust, in a city he had reasons to be cautious in, during a window of time that was already volatile.
And he felt like Snoop may have been trying to line up those other guys.
Deal's argument. Snoop knew who wanted Biggie, knew the environment, and was making calls to find out where Biggie was. Whether that was innocent or not, Biggie was not going to give him the answer.
You understand? Because those other guys told Mace that they wanted Big and Puff.
The claim about what was communicated to Mace remains secondhand and unverified. We are staying in what Deal says he heard, not asserting it as fact. But the logic it feeds is consistent. Biggie, in Los Angeles, understood he was operating in hostile territory, and Snoop, in Deal's telling, was a part of that landscape in a way that made trust impossible. The sarcasm in Oops was Biggie's verdict on Snoop, delivered in the only language Biggie spoke fluently, a bar. And Snoop, who has spent nearly 3 decades reading it as a compliment, may have been given the most Biggie answer possible, one that said everything while appearing to say something else entirely. Deal's pots and pans framing captures the same logic from another angle. He builds it as a hypothetical. If a close friend came to your city and you didn't make a single move to connect with them, no meal, no callback, no moment together, are they actually your pots and pans? His answer is no, and his argument is that Biggie's actions gave that answer clearly, even if Biggie never said it in a press conference.
So is that your man, Pots and Pans? That you in his town for 2 months?
Deal is asking Snoop directly through the logic of his own anecdote. If Biggie was your man like you claim, and he was in your city for 2 months, where were you? The absence answers.
Y'all don't go get a burger? Y'all don't smoke no weed?
2 months. No burger, no smoke session, nothing. That, in Deal's telling, is not the silence of scheduling conflicts or missed opportunities. It is the silence of a man who understood exactly where Snoop stood and chose to keep his distance, in private, with no interview, no statement, no public signal, except in a single word inside a recording booth. Oops. What Voletta Wallace actually said and who she actually named. Now we arrive at the center of the title, and the answer is straightforward. Voletta Wallace did not publicly accuse Snoop Dogg of killing her son, not in a verified interview, not in her memoir, not in any documented statement that can be traced to a primary source. No mainstream news article, no court document, and no verified interview shows Voletta Wallace making that accusation against Snoop. What Voletta said, publicly, repeatedly, and on record, was about a different man entirely.
As a parent, I love my son dearly.
Voletta Wallace came from Jamaica to New York in 1968. She raised Christopher Wallace alone from birth. His father left early. She worked through poverty, worked through single motherhood, and put her son in private school. She was a school teacher. Education was her religion. When Christopher dropped out of high school, it hurt her in a way she carried for years. When he picked up a microphone and she heard his voice on the radio, she thought the beats made it sound beautiful and said it was the beginning of his life. Then on March 9th, 1997, it ended.
Born Christopher Wallace, the rising rap star was gunned down in 1997.
No arrests, no convictions, murders, a case that burned for 28 years without resolution, and Voletta Wallace spent every one of those years pushing for answers, suing the LAPD, running the Christopher Wallace Memorial Foundation, fighting to get her son's name on a street in Brooklyn.
Going to unveil the Christopher Notorious Big Wallace way.
But the name she kept returning to in every interview, in every public statement, in the 2005 memoir she wrote alongside co-author Tremo McKenzie, was Sean Combs. She was documented in that memoir as having told Christopher repeatedly while he was alive. "I used to tell Christopher all the time not to trust Sean." She wrote that she believed he loved her son after he was dead. She accused him of invoking Biggie's name and image for commercial purposes while failing the family. She also went after Lil' Kim, writing about seeing Kim photographed in Biggie's mink coat, chain, and hat, describing it with a single phrase, "I felt violated." In 2017, she told the Daily Mail she had a very good idea who murdered her son. She told Rolling Stone she was very optimistic that justice would come. In 2024, as Sean's legal issues became public and accelerating, she said she wanted to slap the daylights out of him. That target, Sean, was consistent from 1997 to the end of her life. A full search of her memoir confirms 0 accusatory mentions of Snoop Dogg in relation to Christopher's death. The book's criticisms target the broader hip-hop industry dynamics, exploitative business practices, and specific figures tied to Biggie's inner circle, none of whom were Snoop. Billboard covered the memoir's controversies in 2005 and noted its targets were Sean and Lil' Kim, not Snoop. The Howard University News Service published excerpts. None pointed toward Snoop as a figure she blamed for her son's death. The title, "Biggie's Mom Goes Off on Snoop Dogg for the Last Time. He Culled My Son," is a sentence Voletta Wallace never said. It is constructed from real grief and real anger, then aimed at a name her anger did not land on. Conspiracy content around the still unsolved Biggie and Tupac cases has been a machine for nearly 3 decades. It takes old footage of Voletta speaking about grief and justice, layers it against Snoop's image, and relies on the viewer's existing knowledge of the tension between their camps to fill in a confrontation that never happened. The legacy Voletta actually left. On February 21st, 2025, Voletta Wallace died of natural causes at her Pennsylvania home. She was 78 years old. She died having never seen an arrest in her son's murder case. She died having never publicly accused Snoop Dogg of anything. She died as she had lived since 1997 with her son's name as her mission.
Who would like to be Biggie? To be honest with you, not all the parts of Biggie I would like for them.
That line came from a woman who had complicated feelings about who her son was, a son she adored completely and disagreed with partially, who sold drugs before he sold albums, who rapped about things that made her uncomfortable, who built a career inside a world she watched destroy him.
I would like for them to have his strength, his intelligence.
Voletta was the proud keeper of her son's legacy for decades.
She fought for 2 decades to get a street named after Christopher in Brooklyn. The effort began in the fall of 1997 and hit wall after wall of political resistance. Politicians cited his drug past, his lyrics, his associations. Voletta and a coalition of community advocates, including a neighbor named Virginia Kennedy, refused to stop pushing.
A lot of work was put into this. St. James Place and Fulton Street.
The first person to suggest it was Tish James, now New York's Attorney General, who floated the idea while Voletta was still in acute grief in late 1997. It took over 21 years. Christopher Wallace Way now stands at St. James Place and Fulton Street in Brooklyn. Her son, C.J. Wallace, who played his father in the 2009 film Notorious at age 13, and later described that experience as the moment he began to understand who his father was, spoke plainly about what the legacy meant.
Well, my name. Yeah. This is my name too.
CJ has been clear about the weight of growing up as the child of a legend who isn't there. He said he started becoming aware of who his father was around 13. The film was an entry point, but he has also been clear that the legacy was never fragile. It did not need a street sign to survive.
It should happen, but I do also have to be clear. If it didn't happen, Biggie's legacy is completely intact.
After Biggie's death, Voletta found a bond with Afeni Shakur, Tupac's mother, 2 women from opposite sides of the war that killed both their sons. They chose solidarity over blame, and they built a friendship in the rubble of the rivalry.
We're mothers, we're never alone, and that we're united with other mothers in the same situation.
That choice, Voletta and Afeni, is the one that defines who Voletta actually was. Not a confrontation with Snoop Dogg, a friendship with the mother of the man the world had spent years making her son's enemy.
I love Miss Wallace because Miss Wallace is a mother who's lost her child. And I have deep compassion for every mother
who's lost your child.
The title built around Voletta's name exists because Biggie's murder is unsolved, and unsolved murders generate an infinite supply of accusations. The Biggie-Snoop tension was real, documented by Gene Deal, by Snoop's own Red Hook account, by 2 months of ignored phone calls in Los Angeles. The animosity between their camps was real. The question of what Snoop knew, when, and whether Biggie's distrust was justified, that is real and unresolved. But Voletta Wallace, the woman who knew her son best, who spent 28 years looking at the faces of the men she blamed, she did not put Snoop Dogg's face in that frame. She put Sean's. She put the industry's. She put the LAPD's.
Because of our family, because of our love, and because of our faith in Jehovah God, we can be here today.
Biggie's murder remains unsolved. Voletta Wallace is gone, and the names she was still saying in her final years were not Snoop Dogg's. That is the sentence that defines her. Not a title, not a confrontation, a mother, her son, 28 years of fighting for him, and a name, his, now on a street in Brooklyn where she raised him.